Welcome, Legionnaires, to the Long Live the Legion podcast, where we talk about the Legion of Superheroes comic book team and break subjects down so that whether you're just out of the Legion Academy or you're a longtime veteran with your own flight ring, you get to know the team a little bit better. I'm your co-host, Jim.
And I'm your co-host, Jay.
And welcome to episode 31. I see some new images coming on the mission monitor board there today, Jay. What's going on?
So today's a fascinating episode. We're going to go back into, we sometimes go into TV shows when we talk about the Legion, and we're going to go to live action Legion, which is very rare to find. And this is one of the only examples I think that's out there. We're going to take a look at Smallville Season 8, Episode 11, which is called Legion, where the Legion of Superheroes, or at least the Trinity of the Legion, shows up to hang out with Clark Kent. And we have a very, very special guest today, Anthony Desiato. And please, Anthony, if you could introduce yourself, tell us who you are, that'd be awesome.
Well, thank you guys for having me. I host the podcast Digging for Kryptonite, a Superman fan journey. We cover the character across time and media. We've talked a lot about Smallville, a little bit about Legion, more to come in the future. But I'm really honored to be here and compare notes with you guys on this episode, which is one of my favorites.
Awesome. Yeah, when we had this on our docket, I was like, well, there's only one guy that I think we have to have on this podcast to talk about this particular episode. And that's so welcome, Anthony. Thanks for coming. And, thanks for all the great podcasts that you've been doing around Superman. And I can't wait to start the Batman one that you just started releasing.
Thank you.
That's going to be fun. Okay. So this is Season 8, Episode 11. Do I have that right there, Jay? And so on the Smallville series, and like you said before, it's called Legion, is written by Jeff Johns, interestingly enough. So it's somebody who has a lot of that DC background. He kind of knows what he's talking about. And one of the things we've known about Jeff is that he's very good at finding a kind of a core story from somewhere in DC lore and adapting that into a different medium. He's done this for lots of different shows in the Berlantiverse and beyond and all that stuff. So in this particular case, the whole concept behind Smallville is that it's Clark's adventures before he became Superman, but we can't use the Superboy name for, I guess, legal reasons, most likely. And it honestly, Anthony, I was really surprised that this series has lasted as long as it did. I guess the end of the show is him kind of becoming Superman. So, I mean, what's your take on the show itself with regards to its longevity?
Yeah, I mean, it's a decade-long origin story. And I think what a lot of us fans have sort of landed on is that for the first portion of the show, it does function as a prequel. And then I think you get to a certain point, particularly this last stretch, and it's probably less so a prequel and more the Superman story just happening earlier. Mm-hmm. And I think if you can kind of wrap your head around that, then I think it's a fun ride. I know maybe for some fans, they bump up against that a little bit. Like, why is he encountering all of these people so early? But I think, like I said, at a certain point, it's the Superman story early. But what we see here as far as bringing in other DC Comics heroes, I mean, this was in keeping with what the show had been doing as far back as season 4 when they first introduced Bart Allen Impulse. So that specifically was very much in the mode. This was distinct in that you had much more of those nods towards who Clark is going to become, but given the time travel element, that would make sense anyway. So there are aspects of this episode and this season and this era of the show that are really distinct, which we can talk more about. But at the most basic level, as far as bringing in characters from other pockets of the DC universe, in keeping with what the show had done.
Yeah, I think it was really interesting because with this particular episode, as it kind of starts, and I'm going to ask you about some of the lead up and then the follow up to this episode. The episode begins in the aftermath of an attack from Doomsday, right? Which is kind of remarkable. Because when I was, I guess, back in the day, in the early aughts when this was on, I only watched this very sporadically, and I definitely watched the Legion episode. So when I watched it this time a couple of weeks ago, I was I was kind of surprised because I'd forgotten all of this. And to your point about this being the Superman story just earlier, it's also earlier, but also with a less developed set of powers. So it kind of adds that little twist on it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the use of Doomsday was a big swing. And yeah, I've been complaining about this for almost 20 years now. You watch the whole season and it's really building up towards this really epic, climactic final battle between Clark and Doomsday. And without spoiling the whole thing, it didn't live up to that in my eyes. And I think newer fans of the show who watched the season in a binge, I don't think it troubles them as much. But as someone who was watching it week to week, really anticipating that, and having gotten into comics with the death of Superman as I did, I had certain expectations that I don't feel the show was really able to deliver. But what I can say to sort of put this in context, so season 8 marked a massive shift in a number of respects in front of and behind the camera. So at the end of season 7, the creators and original showrunners, Al Gough and Miles Miller, left. And so in season 8, you had a quartet of producers who stepped up as showrunners. And then in season 9 and 10, 2 of them would continue on. There was also a massive budget cut. You look back at the early seasons of the show, and there was a lot that was done outside, on location. There were some amazing needle drops. The soundtrack was amazing. We get into this era of the show where we're on sets where they built during season 7, anticipating not having the resources moving forward. During season 7, they built that Metropolis street set so that they had that. But, so there's a shift in that respect as well. And then probably, the biggest thing, I guess, creatively is that we lost Michael Rosenbaum as Lex Luthor, Kristen Kruk as Lana Lang, although she's back for a few episodes, including this one, and John Glover as Lionel Luthor. So a trio of characters all left at the end of season 7 who had been there from the beginning. That then gave way to bringing in Doomsday in season 8, Zod in season 9, Darkseid in season 10, because we lost a major anchor of the show in Lex Luthor. And then hand in hand with this, they moved a lot of the action to Metropolis. They had Clark take a job at the Daily Planet. They finally started playing up the Lois and Clark back and forth. So there were just a lot of shifts happening here in season 8. So this really marked a major transition and the start of what we refer to as like the Metropolis years of the show, those final 3 seasons.
Gotcha. From the special effects perspective, from a TV show in that era, I don't expect a whole heck of a lot, right? But I thought they did okay for what they had for the budget. I'm like, okay, it's fine. It's not obviously 10 years later when the Berlantiverse was going, they had a little bit better effects. But even then, you could tell there was a budget that they had to deal with, and it's fine. But it does show the budget purse strings do show in a couple scenes in this particular episode.
I'll say though, to their credit, I still stand by their visual representation of Doomsday.
Yeah.
I do think there was a little CGI augmentation. I'm not 1,000% sure, but it was a guy in a suit because we've seen the behind the scenes photos. And I think the suit itself, as well as the way the character was lit and shot in the few instances where we saw Doomsday, I was fine. For all whatever complaints I might have about Doomsday on the show, that wasn't one of them. I actually was impressed that they were able to do that much at that time with their budget limitations.
I found it interesting that you mentioned like the budget cuts and the cast changes, because that was like, I go into this, and I mentioned this before we started recording, like if I saw an episode of Smallville before we watched this for this podcast, I have no memory of it. Like I'm pretty sure I watched the pilot or like the first couple of episodes, but just kind of blanked. The joys of getting old is your memory just disappears on this stuff, right? And I remember like sitting there going like, where's Lex? Where are his parents? Which I was kind of like, because he'd still go back to the farmhouse. And I'm like, well, what happened to them? And then Kristen Crook's name is not in the opening credits. And I'm like, okay, what's happened here? And then of course, my first thought whenever something like that happens, like cast changes for 2 reasons, right? Like it's either the actors say, I've done this too long, I want to go do something else, or the ratings have dropped, or it's just not profitable anymore. So do you know, Anthony, like was the show itself starting to kind of suffer on that, or was it just the network saying to keep it profitable, we have to cut somewhere?
Well, Michael Rosenbaum has talked about this a lot on his various podcasts. So I think had the price been right, I think he would have come back. The story that he's always told is that he was offered the same amount he was previously making, but it was presented to him as like, hey, look what we have for you. That's his version of it. And so he decided to walk, and not present in this episode, but there are moments in season 8 where someone gets a message from Lex, or you see the back of a bald head. They tried to work around him. I think they had the hope that he would do an episode or 2 or do a voice cameo or something, but we don't see him again, spoiler alert, until the series finale. But so that's what I think was going on there. With Kristen Kruk, I'm not 1,000% sure if it was a financial consideration or she was just ready to move on. But the reason we got her here was that season 7, the prior season, was shortened by the writer's strike.
Okay.
And to Smallville's credit, they were back up and running. They actually only ended up missing 2 episodes, so they did 20 instead of 22. But I think they had completed 15 episodes before the strike, and then after the strike, they came back and did 5 more. But at that point, Kristen was off doing the Street Fighter movie, I believe. So they let her out to do that. So she still owed them 5 episodes. Hence these 5 episodes that she does in season 8 here.
Gotcha. Okay.
And then once she's done, she's done.
Wow.
That's it.
So this is one of my questions because they make a big deal of her being away prior to this. So what was Lana doing for her mission, I guess, for her disappearance in the show?
Well, so towards the end of season 7, she was infected or attacked by Brainiac and she was comatose. And that's how they wrote her out for those few episodes of season 7 at the end that she missed. She was just off in the hospital comatose. But then at the very end of season 7, she did make a cameo in the finale via a recording that Clark watches where she's woken up and she says, basically, I need to leave so you can be the hero the world needs. And I'll always love you and this and that. And then she comes back in the previous episode to what we just watched, Bride. And so we get this, and we get more backstory about what she's been up to. But the short version is she didn't leave of her own volition. Lex was involved and then she got away. It was to be perfectly honest, I don't remember all of the beats of her off-screen journey there, but you get hints of it in this because Imra's talking to her about like, I know what you were really up to and all of that. So the long and short of it is that Lex had been developing this power suit, but it's more of a, how to describe it? It's just kind of like grafts right onto the skin. It's not a mechanical suit or anything that we might expect. So basically, it's nothing you can see.
Okay.
But it's something
that would cost more money,
budget,
right?
The budget strikes again. Yeah.
And so that's what she's been hunting, right? So off screen, she's been taken away by Lex, but then she gets away, and then she's tracking down the suit, and she ultimately is able to get her hands on it and dons the suit, and it gives her powers. I mean, I can spoil the outcome of this if you'd like, if you want to know where this ends up for her.
Go ahead. This is an old show.
So in her final episode, quote unquote Lex, via body double, has planted a kryptonite bomb on the roof of the Daily Planet. And through her suit, she has the capacity to absorb kryptonite radiation. She absorbs so much in stopping that kryptonite bomb that she literally becomes toxic to Clark. Like he can't physically get near her because she's emanating this kryptonite radiation. And so she leaves, and that's that. And I always say to myself, it's like, is someone in the government like tracking cancer rates in areas where she's living? Because it's like, we do know that kryptonite radiation can affect humans, but that's kind of what's going on her front.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, thanks for that. Yeah, because this was a big question that I had because it was kind of presented very dramatically as part of the story at the very beginning.
I read that this is like the longest pre-show intro in all of Smallville because they had so much to cover. So Jim and I being completely blind to what's going on, I want to see if he and I have actually figured this out, and Anthony, tell us where we're wrong, because I was watching this and there's just so much stuff being thrown at me and I'm like, wait, what? Wait. Okay. So let's start with this. Chloe was going to marry Jimmy Olsen. Okay. So we got that part. Yep. Okay. Perfect.
Did marry him. They did get married.
Okay. So they have the wedding at Clark's farmhouse. Okay. And then Doomsday attacks and there's enough blood to kill at least 2 people, but nobody actually died, right?
Yeah, I forget offhand if there are any actual casualties. Maybe not, but definitely Jimmy is severely wounded and he's taken off to Star City because we don't have Aaron Ashmore for all the episodes, right? So he's got to be away for a little while. And Lois has to go with him because we don't have Erica Durance for all the episodes.
Right. And that's another budget thing.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Well,
that was another thing. As soon as I saw that, I was like, that's the first sign that a TV show has budget problems when the main cast is like gone. And okay. So that's cool. Green Arrow's on this, right? Yeah.
They introduced him. He did an arc in season 6, 1 episode in season 7, and then they brought him back as a regular for 8, 9, and 10.
But he's just not there for this.
Right. So as far as episode counts, so I think generally speaking, yes, we are in the realm of a budgetary constraints. Cassidy Freeman as Tess Mercer, who's also not in this episode, Justin Hartley as Oliver Queen, Aaron Ashmore as Jimmy Olsen, and Whitwer as Davis Bloom. Like they're only in maybe 13 out of the 22. So they're going to be off the board every now and then. Tom Welling, Allison Mack, like they're in all the episodes. Erica Durance is sort of an interesting subcategory because my understanding, and this has been talked about a bunch over the years, is that maybe budget played some role into it, but it was also a DC restriction. Like they were very limited when they first wanted to bring her on. And at the very beginning, DC only allowed 4 episodes. It was like you could have her for 4 episodes. And then they kind of loosened up and they kept bringing her back. And so from, say, seasons 4 through 8, it was typically a 13 out of 22 sort of deal. And then I think she did 18 out of 22 in season 9. And then season 10, she was in all of them. So we finally got there. But so that was sort of a separate issue.
So the one that I am most confused about is Sam Witwer's whole thing. So
Yes.
I am sure I'm going to be wrong on all of this. So please tell me where I'm wrong. He's Kryptonian?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, he's the
How?
human camouflage of Doomsday.
Right. That's what
Okay.
I figured too. Okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
But I'm just going from the pre thing, and it's like, so he's Kryptonian, but then he's turning into Doomsday. But does he know he's Kryptonian?
So at this point, the picture has sort of started to come into focus for him because there was an episode, I think episode 8, Bloodline, where we have some Phantom Zone business, and Feora possesses Lois and finds Davis and talks to him and says, "I'm your mother." Because the idea is that Zod and Feora contributed the genetic material to create Doomsday, this ultimate weapon that was attached to Kal-El's ship, but then was found by Lionel Luthor and then went off and had his own side journey. There's an episode later in the season where they really lay out all of Davis's backstory. But essentially what we need to know is that this is, and I have to say, although surely this was born out of the inability to show Doomsday in monster form every week, I did always find this idea intriguing, and it never made its way into the comic as far as having a human camouflage. And it is in keeping with Doomsday and the adaptability of the character. So yeah, Davis Bloom, he's a paramedic, starts, at first glance, seems like a really nice guy. And throughout the first half of the season, though, he keeps blacking out and he wakes up, he's like covered in blood. And so he's having these rage outs where he's transforming into the monster and all of that. But yeah, the full picture hasn't totally come into view for him yet, but he knows he has this dark side and these dark impulses.
Right.
As we get later into the season, he's going to start to murder evil people because he finds that killing quells the monster within. So in the first half of the season, it's like he can't control it. He just blacks out, turns into the monster, goes on this killing spree, and then just like doesn't know what happened. But then in the latter half of the season, he has more of an awareness. And like I said, he finds that if he indulges in this impulse to kill, it quells the beast within him. So it affords him some amount of control. And he purposely chooses people he feels are deserving of being killed because he doesn't consider himself an evil person.
Right.
Is the whole thing.
Perfect.
That's his.
I know it probably would have been easier for me to watch the 10 episodes before that, but I was like,
that's quite all right.
So did I miss anything? Jim, did I miss anything there?
Well, I just want to say, two things. I jumped for joy when I saw Sam Witwer in the credits because I love Sam Witwer because he's all over, our genre. So it's always a treat when I get to see him perform something. But the other person I guess we want to talk about really quickly is Chloe, because she has a really significant role here because she is possessed by Brainiac.
Yeah. So there's this whole side with Chloe where, in a couple of episodes prior, she was losing all of her memories. And Clark, and this was a result of the infection by Brainiac, and Clark brought her to the fortress, and Jor-El seemingly cured her. But then at the end of that episode, we find out that Brainiac was able to infiltrate the fortress. And that's why it's all dark when you see it here. We do get a vocal cameo by James Marsters, and he's like, "Doomsday is coming." I was like, ah. So that was fun. And in that episode, Abyss, it's called, where Clark has Jor-El, quote unquote, cure Chloe. He asks, and you see this in the preview, I believe, or the recap. He asks Jor-El to erase any memory that Chloe has of his secret.
Right.
So you get just a couple of episodes where, she doesn't know anything about his superhero persona, his Kryptonian origins, anything like that. So that's kind of what's going on her.
Gotcha. And I really appreciated the use of the Donner movie motif of the Fortress of Solitude, right? The whole crystalline structure. That was really cool because it gave a nice connection point to say, okay, I know exactly what this is. And then how they used it from, very similar in some ways to the Gun movie where it was darkened, right? When power was taken down from it, it turned less glowy, I guess.
Yeah, the Donner movies were very much a touchstone for Smallville, for better or worse. Arguably for better in most instances. I think when we get to the series finale, I think there were a couple of things they did because they felt they needed to kind of line up. And I'm like, you guys could have just done your own thing here. But yes, when you would get elements of the musical cue, or you would see that visual imagery, when they showed people trapped in the Phantom Zone, it was the same imagery from the movie. So yeah, there were things like that I think made for kind of a shorthand for the audience. It's like, that's what we're doing.
Yep. Awesome. Yeah, so I think we covered everything from the lead-in and all the players that we're going to have to deal with here until we get to the Legion.
So the episode starts. It's the aftermath of the attack at the wedding. They're cleaning up. And then I believe this is the first Persuader live-action appearance ever, correct?
I think so. I'm pretty sure.
So the Persuader of the Fatal Five shows up and is there to destroy a crystal, right?
Yes. So it is a red crystal. I made a note of this being they call it a Phantom Zone crystal, but when I was watching this, it reminded me of the Bigstilian crystals, the touchstones that Phantom Girl wears. So I wondered if John's made a connection point for that. And then, so Persuader comes in, just hacks the box, and then proceeds to swipe it at Clark and actually draws blood. He significantly cuts him. And then there's a big flash of light, and all of a sudden we see 3 new characters swoop in and help save the day here and enter the Legion.
So a question about Superman at this point, or Clark Kent at this point. Does he not have super speed, or was it just like a plot injury to show how dangerous the axe was? Because I remember watching this going like, the guy has an axe. You obviously see it's an axe.
I think it was more he just didn't think it would hurt him.
Yeah. That's how I took it too.
So at this point in the show, he has all of his traditional abilities except flight, as is discussed here. And that won't come until the very end of the show.
Okay. Yeah, so then we get the big flash of light, and we refer to them as the Trinity of the Legion. So
Sure.
On this podcast, we get Cosmic Boy, we get Saturn Girl, and we get Lightning Lad. So let's just start. Should we just talk about the 3 actors or the portrayals to start before we get into the plot here? I just wanted to get opinions. Like, what did you guys think about how the 3 of them carried on, like played the Legionnaires?
Anthony, do you want to go first?
I want to toss the ball to you guys because I thought they did a great job, but also I didn't. Then especially, now my Legion experience has grown a lot, but especially when I watched this for the first time, it's like I really didn't have any preconceived notions. I mean, I was expecting more when they brought in Bart, where they brought in Arthur Curry, because I was more familiar with those characters, and I love the depictions that we got. Here, I didn't have as much in the way of expectations. I really enjoyed these depictions, but I'd be really more curious to hear what you guys.
Well, Jay, I'm sure you were happy that they were all Canadian. So,
I've been resisting so hard because part of being a Canadian is anytime you talk about a TV show or a movie or music or whatever, we have to say he's Canadian. She's Canadian. That's just a standard requirement of being Canadian.
It's the Legion. The Legion is Canadian, man. So you should be like happy about it.
Lana Lang's Canadian, so I'm.
Half the cast is exactly right.
Yeah, I get to do that. So I was going to say, well, before I get into my pro-Canadian rants, Jim, what did you think?
Well, so I think they did a good job of lining up to archetypes. I mean, it's funny looking at this. You could tell. I'm just going to say off the bat that, it's not the best acting I've ever seen in my life. That's fine. I mean, they're early in their careers, right? But Ryan Kennedy, who's somebody who's been you see him all over the place. I was looking at his IMDb and you see he's been like here and there, like all over the place for like the last 15 years. And you've most likely seen something that he's been in. And I thought he did a really good job playing the leader who has a stick up his ass, right? They lined up to that archetype of Rock Kryn very, very well. And then you had Callum Worthy as Garth, who I think he did a good enough job of being a little bit impetuous, but I didn't get quite the fire or the spark, to coin that phrase, of the character that I'm quite used to from the comic page, being a little bit more brash than this guy was. This Garth seemed a little bit more almost timid in some ways, although he did have the fanboy part of it was cool. And then they had Alexa Johnson as Imra, who also is somebody who, I guess, from an actor perspective, she was doing a lot of stuff at that point in time in the early aughts and the mid aughts. And then she's kind of transitioned more into a musician career now, and she was fine. It's probably one of the easiest roles on the page because Imra is always kind of this ethereal kind of character. When you're a telepath, you can kind of get away with a lot of voiceover work and things like that, where you don't have to necessarily emote quite as much, and even when you are talking and performing, you can kind of be a little bit out there and I guess a bit not ditzy, because ditzy has the wrong connotation, but you know what I mean.
Or just disconnected.
Disconnected
right?
is a better word.
Just sort of away from everybody. And I think,
aloof.
I really liked Ryan Kennedy as Rock. I thought he did exactly what the character was supposed to do, and he was the perfect counterpoint for Clark. And then I thought, like, his change of mind as the show went on, like he was the one who actually sort of grew as things were going on. And I thought he conveyed that well. And you're right. Like Imra's character was more just kind of above everything. Like, and she, like you mentioned earlier, the scene with Lana Lang where she's like, I know what happened and you're going to be this. And she was kind of the person who was providing the wisdom. The toughest one for me was Lightning Lad. And it wasn't because of anything the actor did. Like, I don't think he did a bad job. I actually thought he did what he was asked to do. It's just, that's not how I picture Lightning Lad in my brain. Like, to me, Lightning Lad is the impetuous, like ready to get into a fight immediately, acts before he thinks.
Yeah.
And he was a little bit too
reserved.
Like Weasley is the word. Like just
like
a
Ron
little
Weasley.
Bit
I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said
that. Yes. And I was just like, that's. I mean, I always hate to say this when you talk about comic books, when you say like, that's not my Lightning Lad, but that's not the Lightning Lad in my brain when I picture the character. But then after about 15 minutes, you go like, okay, but this is what they're doing with this show. Like, it's the same when all three Legionnaires were like, let's kill her. Like, and just like, that was the immediate.
We'll get to that later. We'll get to that later.
And you're just like, that's not my Legion. So as far as those three characters, like, I was happy. I was happy with what they did. Like, maybe it wasn't exactly what I wanted, but I thought the costumes did exactly what they needed to do when you understand, like, we have no money. We've got to make sure, like the logos are there and it looks like something you'd wear when going into the battle. And I thought the three of them, like you mentioned the fanboy aspect. Like, I really liked every moment where they're like, wait, you don't do this yet? Wait, we don't. Like, you haven't, like, and it was just this perfect. And I thought the actors did it really, really well.
Yeah, there was a couple other things too. So Ryan Kennedy, when I was like not paying attention to the TV or to the screen rather, and just listening, it was funny. His voice sounds a lot like Will Wheaton. And Will Wheaton obviously was Cosmic Boy in the animated show, right? So that was a weird note that kind of hit in my brain. I'm like, okay, that's really interesting. But yeah, I mean, I think they did a great job. They did Imra, as she was portrayed, I think is the best one from a live action perspective. There's only been two, as far as I'm aware. There's this one, and then in the 2016 Supergirl series, and that one they took a lot of liberties because she's a brunette telekinetic instead of a blonde telepath. That's a whole other discussion. But yeah, no, other than that, I thought it was well done. So okay, Anthony, your take.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating to hear all this. And like, yeah, the whole fanboy side of it, that was interesting. That definitely jumped out. I remember at the time, and every time I rewatched it since, because the Legionnaires, I mean, they're bringing up these questions that fans had been having and debating. I mean, this is jumping ahead, but when we get to this whole business about, in the future, we know Lois Lane, even Jimmy Olsen. We've never heard of Chloe Sullivan. Well, that was a question hanging over the whole show because, well, here was this original character, Chloe Sullivan. And it's like, well, all right, well, so whatever happens to her, why isn't she part of the Superman lore? So to have that address, and then they sort of bounce around these theories, like, oh, maybe it's her death that finally convinces him to take flight. Maybe she has to change her name. So stuff like that was interesting. Behind the scenes, the whole mantra of the show was no flights, no tights. To actually hear it articulated on the show, it was really interesting and cool. But to what you were saying, and I know we'll get more into this, but the whole business about we have to kill Chloe. So that is very much in keeping with sort of Smallville's approach when they brought in other heroes, with Bart, with AC, with Victor, Ollie, Dinah, where in some way the other hero is further along in their journey than Clark.
Mm-hmm.
Yet at the same time, they still need some moral correction from Clark. And so that's very much at play here, and it's in keeping with what they've done. So I won't go through all of them, but like real quick with Bart Allen, for example, way back in season 4, here was a young kid who like relished his powers, who had fun with them at a time when Clark like really viewed them as a burden and didn't really enjoy that aspect. And so Bart kind of allowed Clark to see like, hey, you can have some fun sometimes. Like you can go run and grab some food from, grab some tacos from Miami or something like that. Yet Bart was running around stealing to fund his lifestyle, and Clark set him straight on that front. So that's been the approach in all of these other hero introductions. And so I think you very much see this here. Like these three come in, they're this well-coordinated unit. They have all of this future knowledge. They can put things in context for Clark. They can give him hints about what's to come. Yet they're ready to kill Chloe. And it's not until we get through this whole story where it's like, oh, okay, now Clark has imparted what is going to be the first tenet of their code. So, yeah, that was very much in line with what Smallville had done.
No, thanks for that, Anthony. That's a lot of really good context because this was the one element of the whole plot where I like double circled and underlined several times. I'm like, what is going on here?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, like this was very much the thing.
All right, so let's proceed here with the plot. So they defeat Persuader in short order and send him back into the future, and then they kind of get to introduce each other. And so we've kind of gone through a lot of that stuff, and then we get a shift of scene over to the Fortress of Solitude, where we see Davis Bloom and talking to Chloe, and this is where we get that interaction of Chloe as Brainiac is going to use Davis as Doomsday to bad ends. And so that's there to just kind of move that particular plot forward. And then we go back and Clark has kind of run away. And this is kind of a cool scene, I thought, because this is, to your point, Anthony, we don't see Clark ever flying. We just see this red and blue blur racing everywhere, right? Which was kind of the effect I thought was very appropriate and very decently done. And then the Legion kind of comes and flies after him, and it's like this really weird whooshing sound. They're very loud flyers for some reason in this show. I don't know what was going on.
They don't have to worry about the sound in the future, right? So they don't have to hide themselves, so they don't care.
I thought flight rings would be just a lot quieter.
So that's supposed to be Metropolis, right?
That's a good question. That overpass, maybe in between. I forget offhand if that's supposed. I think it is supposed to be more Metropolis adjacent. Right. We'll go with that.
I love that you just said by that overpass. So just for all the listeners, in case you don't know, I live in Vancouver, so I see where they shot everything in Smallville. So as this thing is happening, I get to go, oh, that's blah, 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 that's blah, blah, blah. And I always wonder, because they always do this, they always shoot under our SkyTrain bridges. Like, we don't have a subway, we have a SkyTrain. And so that's what they're under. It's actually these train bridges. And I always wonder, like, does anybody else know what these things are? Because they don't look like I've never seen them anywhere else in the world. There's these big concrete structures. And now everybody's going to email and say, no, they're here, they're here, they're here. But I'm glad you said it. So yeah, so if you ever see that, that's actually we'll say subway, but our SkyTrain system. And so I'm like, okay, they have to be in Metropolis right now. But then because it's Vancouver, there's nothing behind it, right? Like, it's just this open space. And I'm like, so are they the outskirts? Are they the suburbs?
Yeah, I mean, they've used that location before, a bunch of times. Again, I want to say it's like outskirts of Metropolis. Like,
that's what I thought. Yeah. But I loved that, like, that scene that we're talking about. I thought it was so well done. Like, I really enjoyed, they fly up, they're like, why aren't you flying? Like, where's this? Like, and like we mentioned before, they're asking questions that I'm sure Smallville fans have asked for 8 years. Like, and you mentioned as well that speech of like, well, we don't know who Chloe is. We know who everybody else is. There was so much subtext to that scene. And again, to talk about the actors of again, like that disappointment of like, wait, you don't fly? Like, are you even the right Superman? Are we in the right place? And you could just feel that. And I thought it was just this really effective way of showing, like, we know who you're going to become, and you're nowhere near that yet. And I thought Tom Welling did a great job of being like, wait, no, this is like, what's going on? And he handled that well.
Yeah, I mean, when he grabs Garth and he's like, Chloe Sullivan doesn't die. It's my second favorite Clark moment of the episode. But yeah, I mean, like, that's the thing. I always think about it first and foremost from Clark's perspective. But yeah, from the Legion's perspective, they've never met this guy. They've learned a myth. Right, this guy's been mythologized, and so they have all these facts and historical records and everything, and then to be confronted with the reality and this questionable, is he not everything we've been told? But then to find out that at the end, in the way that matters most, he is, even if some of those other trappings aren't there yet. It was really great. It really gave them a journey to go on themselves in this.
Absolutely. Now, did they ever define the spatial relationship of like where Metropolis is versus where Smallville is? Because obviously, in the Gunn movie, it's been defined that Metropolis is in Delaware. So
no, I'm laughing because this is within the Smallville fandom. I mean, like, this is a running thing. So both Smallville and Metropolis are in Kansas.
Oh, okay.
In the early seasons of the show, they really made a point, and they adhered to this, that Metropolis was hours away. It was like 2 to 3 hours away. And so they would occasionally go there, but it was a hike.
Right.
Lex would helicopter there. Clark obviously could super speed, but it wasn't something where they were bouncing back and forth. I mean, going back to a standout episode from season 2, Insurgents, where Lionel and Martha are held hostage at Luthor Tower. Like, Jonathan has to beg Lex for a helicopter ride to get to Metropolis so he could be there. It's far. As the series progresses, essentially it becomes a suburb. Like, Smallville is a suburb of Metropolis. And what makes it so egregious is that for seasons, you have both Chloe and Lois regularly making this commute between the Talon in Smallville, where they live, and on the Daily Planet, most generally, or the ISIS Foundation, like these metropolis
Yeah.
sites, just back and forth. So it really just becomes a suburb of Metropolis. But yeah, they really fudged that as the seasons went along because it was firmly established as being hours apart.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, thank you, because I had the same kind of head scratch moment, because like the next scene that we go to literally is Imra visiting Lana at this ISIS Foundation headquarters. And I take it that the ISIS Foundation is a way for essentially folks that have metagenetic powers to have some way into society. Yeah. So Imra goes and visits Chloe. First thing out of Lana's mouth is, "You're crazy. Let me go help you," which I got a nice chuckle out of.
Yep. Yeah, she leads with compassion, you know?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
So I'm gonna do a little reference, and I apologize for this. So anybody who's ever listened to the How Does This Get Made podcast, whenever they talk about hair and makeup or clothing, there's always I could talk about this for an hour. So whoever decided Lana Lang's hair should look the way it does, did she piss off her hair and makeup team at some point? Because that was the one thing that stood out. I was just like, what have they done to her? Why are they doing this to her?
It's funny you bring
There's
that
my
up.
little Jason Mantzoukas point of like, what's happening?
It's so funny because I only recently heard her talking about this. I think it was on Talkville. Otherwise, I would have had no answer for this, but I recently heard her addressing this. So she had cut her hair very short, shorter than what you see. And I guess the producers, like, they wanted it longer. I mean, I don't know why they didn't go with longer extensions. Look, as if I've ever talked about hair in my life, but I don't know why they didn't go with longer extensions or a full-on wig. I don't know. But she talked about how, like, yeah, they put these like little extensions on her short hair. Yeah, it looks, I can't tell you the crush that I had on her watching this as a high schooler when the show was originally airing. She was beautiful then, beautiful now.
Absolutely.
But yeah, that hair, it was just an odd choice. Even she herself admits.
So welcome to the Long Live the Legion podcast, where we will talk about literally anything insane that you've never talked about before. So because that was the one thing that stood out, because I agree with you. Like, this is a beautiful woman. Like, I mean, and you just look at it and go like, who made this choice? Who did she anger? So thank you for that. I'm glad you kind of caught that on the Talkville, but
yeah, it's pretty baffling. I don't know. They should have just let her have whatever short hair she had at the time. You know, it would have been a different look anyway.
Yeah.
And I think it would have been fine. And would have
also, if she was-
differentiated her from Lois. You know, it would have been fine.
Yeah, exactly.
yeah. And also, if she had just gotten out of a coma, like, why not say the hospital gave her a bad haircut while she was there? Like, you could have done so much with it. So
Yeah.
you had fun. But yeah, that was so. Sorry, we'll go back to the scene. Sorry for that aside for everybody who doesn't care about hair and makeup and clothing.
That's all good. I mean, you know, basically, the end result of the scene is that there's this whole thing about, we know Chloe's possessed by Brainiac. The only way to save her is to save the world is to kill Chloe, which is another theme of the episode, kill Chloe. And so Imra meets up with Rock and Garth, and they basically say, yeah, we got to kill her. And meanwhile, Clark goes back to the fortress and has kind of a confrontation with Brainiac / Chloe, where I think Brainiac kind of does the whole monologuing a little bit and explains the whole plot or her plans to take over the world, then tosses Clark against the wall and speeds out of there with her own super speed, which I thought was an interesting little power there, because I never really ever saw Brainiac having any superpowers in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, he basically had very Kryptonian-esque abilities when convenient. But, you know, it's one of those things in the Smallville fandom, we have to contend with this. You know, very unfortunate the road that Allison Mack went down in real life.
Yeah.
But from a performance standpoint, she was so good in this. And I feel like the bloody wedding gown was a really, striking visual look for the character. And there were moments when she was delivering those lines as Brainiac where it's like, oh, I think she looked at some James Marsters clips and was really kind of channeling that energy. So I thought that was cool. The other thing here, and I have to imagine this is the Jeff Johns effect, where Brainiac's MO in this, absorb and destroy. I'm going to acquire all of the knowledge of this planet, and then Doomsday's going to wipe it out. New for Brainiac in this show. So originally, when he's introduced in season 5, he's an agent of Zod. His whole thing is trying to free Zod from the Phantom Zone. So it takes until now and the writing of Jeff Johns to really kind of center this Brainiac back to a more traditional motivation here, which I think ultimately, I'm glad they landed on this, that they got there eventually.
No, that's a great call out, though. The mood in that scene is extremely dark and intense because you have the fortress, and then, like you said, the iconic bloody dress, and then the battle. The one thing that I thought was kind of cool about this is that she's talking about how Doomsday is going to essentially mop up everything. Meanwhile, Sam Witwer's over in a piece of ice, like right over here, and nobody even talks about him, right? So Clark has no idea he's sitting right there, which I thought was an interesting little take.
Well, because Clark, we're only at episode 11 of 22. Clark can't yet know that it's Davis who's Doomsday.
Yeah.
So it was one of those things, and my God, it's not limited to this. I complain about this, and not a complaint, but it's one of those things. I feel like if I were Superman or Clark Kent, I kind of feel like almost any time I entered a situation, especially a potentially dangerous one, I would just do a scan. I would just scan everything real quick, right? Yeah. And it's not limited to this, but that often doesn't happen. But yeah, if he had, he'd probably be like, hey, who's that up there?
Well, that's the most dangerous thing when you watch these and you go, well, if I had these powers, I would blah, 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 or I would do this. And I always kind of wrote it off as I know this isn't part of the story, and I'm sure there's been Smallville conversations about this, but like there were moments during this episode where I'm like, oh, did he used to date Chloe? Because there just seems like there's a far more, like it a lot of times didn't seem like I know they're trying to do like a brother sister, like that's how close they are. But there were times where I'm like, okay, there's something, and he's just distracted because this person that he loved, I don't want to say in love with, because I know that's not what's supposed to be, but it kind of felt that way, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. So there's a strong contingent of fans out there who really ship Clark and Chloe. I never counted myself among them, even back in the day. I was always all about Lana. But early on, I mean, really for the first few seasons, arguably, Chloe clearly had feelings for Clark. Clark was always so infatuated with Lana. It was rare that he would sort of kind of entertain the notion of a romance with Chloe, although they did broach the subject a number of instances. I think the most notable one was they attended the spring formal together in the season 1 finale, and they danced, and they were just about to kiss when they got interrupted because of the tornado, and Clark had to speed off to save Lana, and then they went back to being friends. And so there are moments along the way. But honestly, even as late as the end of season 5, when Zod's attacking, like Chloe grabs Clark and plants one on him. So, there were moments along the way, but it was never a full-blown romance. And it was almost always kind of driven from Chloe's perspective, although you always got the sense Clark was intrigued by the idea, but never really went there. And by this point in the show, it's fair to say, like, they really hadn't moved past that.
Yeah. And it sounds like they were even moving past the Clark and Lana romance because with the introduction of Lois in there. Or
Yeah,
those,
by
at least they were
necessity.
moving past it. Yeah.
Yeah. Although, I mean, in the very next episode, Clark and Lana will rekindle things.
Oh, really?
So,
Of course.
It's got to be hilarious for you, is that like we're saying these things, and to you it's like, oh yeah, well this blah 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 and this happened. Like I know so very little, but I'm like, I don't know. I would think after Lana almost married Lex, which I believe was a plot point, right? That Clark would be like, and I'm done. Like, I've got to move on from this.
That was not the end of it. Well, listen, when I have you guys on my show in the not too distant future, and we talk Legion, and the situation is going to be reversed.
Perfect.
Man, there's so many Legionnaires. You'd be like, yeah, dummy.
Yep.
So, not that I'm saying dummy now. Not that I'm saying that now.
They didn't know she was a girl. They thought she was her brother. Yep. Don't ask. It was the 60s. Let's just keep moving on.
I know. This is why it's so wild.
So speaking of Clark and Lana, so next thing we see is Clark and Lana Clark goes to see Lana at her headquarters. Meanwhile, Chloe has zipped off to the Daily Planet headquarters in Metropolis and is starting to take over the computer system and is expanding her network across the world. And while Clark and Lana are very seriously talking about the whole, should we kill Chloe or not? And they come to the perspective of no. And all of a sudden, Lana's computer starts showing the iconic 3 Brainiac orbs, and she becomes hypnotized. Then after that, then the Legion starts to kind of step in.
Yeah, and we get we actually get to see the powers being used. And one thing that I did really like was they had Lightning Lad and Cosmic Boy work together. It's like, okay, really we've got electricity and we've got magnetism, both things that mess up robots. So what are we calling Brainiac? And I thought that was a great touch. Like, even we talked about this at the beginning, like the special effects are 2009. So if you're expecting, like Marvel movie level, it's not there, but I thought it looked really, really good, and it was really effective, and it showed, hey, teamwork, which in the comics, Legion writers have trouble with. So the fact that they pulled this out in a TV show, I thought was awesome.
Yeah.
Well, a
And
couple of things. I mean, to the show's credit, I mean, especially in the early seasons. I mean, the show started in 2001. I mean, and not to knock something like Lois and Clark: The New Adventures of Superman, but that finished only 4 years earlier, and to see what Smallville was then able to do just a few years later was
yeah,
really something. And I think ahead of its time. And do all of those effects hold up? No, not necessarily, but for the most part, I would argue that they do. And then, yes, when we get into this era of the show, a bit more limited, but I think they did a good job for the most part of working within their bounds. And they got away with a lot, the quick blurs and things like that. Like that accomplished a lot. But I really like the scene with Clark and Lana. Fans might vary on this because it's like, do you need to have Clark doubting himself? But I think it was important that he's so self-assured when he's talking to the Legion. Chloe Sullivan doesn't die. But then it's like you kind of see behind the scenes of like, hey, like, I'm not 100% sure. And then you see the role that Lana plays of just kind of giving him that reassurance of like, no, like the Clark I know would insist there's a way. And, and it's true. But I'm glad that we had that little beat there because, just to kind of show, a little bit more behind what's going on.
Yeah, she's his conscience to a good degree, right? Which I think was a great touch.
And also as well, like you never want a Superman who's perfect everywhere. I think that's just a boring character. Whereas Tom Welling is great at doing that other side of the character where it's like, with all the other acting jobs he's done, like he can get that introspective side. And I agree, like that's a perfect point. I think without that scene, the show doesn't hit as well. And you need to have him say like, am I sure I don't know if I'm making the right choice because these three people who know everything because they're from the future, they're telling me to do something else. And that would be a hard thing to fight against.
Yeah, it's like the Star Trek, the Spock adage, right? The needs of the many are greater than the needs of the few. And Clark goes back to Lana to kind of reinforce that his thinking to save Chloe is the right thing to do. And which of course it is. And then that's the point where kind of everything starts coming together. All the plot points are really starting to zoom together. And to your point, actually to both of your points, I thought the team up with Rock and Garth was that was probably the best moment of the episode for me. I thought it was so cool. Like of course, electromagnetism. Of course, why has this not been done more before? Right? It was perfect. And then they all head out back to I guess they're heading back to the barn to.
Well, first Clark stops them right when they're at the planet, and that's that big moment where, and this is one of my all-time favorite moments of the series, where he's like, does your Legion have any principles?
Yeah.
You speak of a code, but if it had anything to do with me, rule number 1 would be do not kill, ever. And then this is probably my favorite part of this, where he's like, if you ever believed in me, and even if you don't now, help me. Man, I love it. Like that's the moment. And that the whole thing comes down to that for me.
Yeah, no, thanks, Anthony, because I just glossed over like the biggest like eye rolling moment of this episode where the Legion is surrounding Chloe like they're in some kind of weird cult about to sacrifice her. It was the strangest thing.
Chloe would be fine with sacrifices to cults. I'm sorry, I couldn't resist cult jokes. I've been holding on for almost an hour. I got it. So it was a weird scene, and it was really good the way Clark handled that of just like, hey, if you believe me. Again, as a Legion fan, it's one of those moments where like it's tough to watch as a Legion fan because it so doesn't fit the Legion. But I understand, like after the episode was over and you get a chance to think about it, you go, okay, I understand why they did this. But to me, like the Legion would be, yeah, we know your code. Like we'd be ahead of that. But I get why they did it for the show, right? Like I understand that, but it didn't feel, from a Legion perspective, it didn't feel right. But from the story perspective, it did, if that made any sense.
And Anthony, I think that goes to what you were talking about before, about how this show introduces other DC properties in a particular phase of their careers, right? And that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, and I 1000% get like where you would be coming from the Legion perspective. But yeah, I mean, I think if you just sort of wrap your arms around the idea that, this is just like it's an earlier incarnation of Superman. He's not, all of the pieces aren't together yet. Similarly and I guess it's a little tough with the Legion because they're already coming from the future. They seem pretty fully formed. Yeah. But to kind of settle into that frame of mind that it's like, they, just like Clark, there's still this step that they haven't yet taken. And this is what Clark will allow them to do.
I think if it had been a younger Legion, like if they had hired younger actors, it might have hit a little bit better. But like especially like again, as a Legion fan, like okay, they started when they were 15. They're obviously early 20s in this episode.
Well, in fairness, the actors are early 20s. The characters might be meant to be 15.
Yeah, we don't know. We don't know. Garth seems the youngest of the bunch for sure.
Yeah. No, it's but again, I love those scenes, and Tom Welling's amazing at them when he gets that sort of moral center. Like he's just great at like, no, here's what's happening, da da da, and like you get the chills, and you're like, yes, that's Superman. Like he just so embodies it so well that it was, I thought one of the best scenes in the show. Even as my brain is like, not the Legion, not the Legion.
Yeah,
I hear you.
Yeah.
I get it. I get it.
Yeah, and there was another little line in here too, where they kind of pass they pass the knife to see who wants to actually do the killing, and Garth grabs it and he's like, "I'm going to see this through for once," and I'm just like, "What the hell does that mean?" I want to know more about this Legion for lots of reasons, and they're not all good.
How many people have you killed in the future? What's going on there? What's happening? All right, so they stop, and then the final battle is the farmhouse, is that right?
Yeah, then they go back to the barn, and that's when they perform the techno exorcism.
Yeah.
But Clark, I have to say, to his credit, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say he's the most scientifically minded character on the show, but for him to say like, hey, can you guys combine your powers and use it to pull out the nanites that make up Brainiac? It's like, all right, good for you.
Hey, somebody has to think of it, right?
So that's what they end up doing at the barn there.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not exactly sure what's going on because it's all, it's television physics, but Garth is putting Chloe in some kind of stasis so that she doesn't attack them back, and Rock extracts the Brainiac nanites and then forms them into this cool spear that.
And Imra's making sure Chloe's okay.
Yes.
And making sure that, so like all three of them are using their powers at the same time, which is, again, great to see. And I did like the fact in that, like, Clark kind of not takes a back seat, but he's just the idea man at that point. Like he's not, and I was like, that's an interesting choice because normally your hero has to be the hero at every point, and he's not. And then we get, after they pull out the orb of Brainiac, we get the really cool moment of, we're going to bring Brainiac to the future and maybe we're going to have Brainiac 5. And you're like, oh, that's an interesting twist.
And they pay that off in season 10.
Oh, do they really?
So it's not a green traditional looking Brainiac 5. It's James Marsters again. But he comes back in episode 200, Homecoming, which is an absolute series highlight where, long story short, he takes Clark on this journey through the past, present, and future, and really helps Clark kind of come to terms with what's happened and where he's going. And it's a really pivotal point in the series and that final season. And so you do get good Brainiac 5 down the line.
Yeah, and I noticed, I was looking, I think I went into the Wikipedia for this because Imra makes a comment of, this will be the 5th Brainiac and we need to make sure it's a good one. So I was like, okay, so what are the other 4? And I think they rattle them off in the context of Smallville in the Wikipedia page. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Oh, all right. That's more, I mean, I don't know if they're counting, because, we've had James Marsters pop up as Brainiac a few times. Maybe if they're counting each one of them, I don't know. I'll defer to Wiki on that.
I just say, I love the fact that you're telling us like episode 200 is one of the high marks of a show that lasts 10 years, because television traditionally, like with every season, there's a little bit of decay in quality and and sometimes it's a big one. So like, that's awesome to hear that this is a show that maintained everything.
Yeah.
That's always been, that's my big fear when I get to season 8 or season 9 and I'm like, okay, what's happening?
I'll say real quick, like this era of the show, season 8, I've always said is kind of a tale of two seasons, because the first half of season 8 I thought was like up to this episode was really strong, and they really front loaded a lot of Erica Durance's appearances. It's pretty Lois heavy in the first half, which was a lot of fun. Second half, not so much, and I found the Doomsday climax sort of unfulfilling. So very strong first half, not so great second half, in my opinion. Season 9 is a really cohesive season from start to finish with Zod. Definitely a standout in this era. And then season 10, there are some really high highs, like episode 200. Like there are a number along the way that are real standouts. As a whole, the season doesn't really come together the way like season 9 did. So it's a little bit more of a mixed bag, but that's kind of how I look at each of these final 3.
Well, I think if you're still getting high highs in season 10, I think that's a great sign. Like I think of what are some shows that really fell apart. We can go with that. Like where you get to those final seasons and like the comedy isn't hitting, or you can tell the actors are bored, or it just isn't working, right? And so it's good that if they're still hitting highs in the final season, that's a good sign for a show. Especially, you mentioned earlier, like all the interviews with Michael Rosenbaum talking about behind the scenes. Like every interview I see with Tom Welling is like, I was so tired. Every day I was so tired.
Yeah. They definitely worked him. And I'm glad that he's at a point now where he can talk about the show and revisit it, and it's not as much of a burden for him. But yeah, I mean, it seems like, as he describes it, it's like he was in a submarine for 10 years, with that schedule.
Yeah, it's got to be rough. And I mean, I remember listening to him talking about the drive, the commute, and living here. I can understand what he's talking about, and it's like, yep, I can see that being a drag and a half. So it's all good. Okay. And then we get the wrap up of the show. We get the cool moment with the baseball. I did love the little bit of like, hey, this is the only thing that isn't in the future. And then they immediately show you why it's not in the future as, Clark signs it. And then the thing that I love, and again, as a Legion fan, he gets the flight ring. And he doesn't put it on because he knows if he puts it on, it's going to send him to the future. And there's that final scene where he's staring at it. And so this is something that I'm always curious about with somebody who comes to the Legion through Superman or Superboy, whereas we, go to the character through the Legion, is like, to me, that flight ring is just part of who Superboy, Superman is. Like, that's part of the costume almost, especially as Superboy. Like, I'm just used to seeing Superboy drawn with this flight ring. So it was this really cool moment for me. So for you, like, when you think of the Legion, like, what's your connection? Like, is your Superman or is your Superboy as connected to the Legion? Or how do you see that?
Yeah, that's a good question. Honestly, I would say it's changed over these past few years. I mean, was it 2 years ago? I did this whole run on my show of Clark as Superboy, really tracking the history. That's when I really encountered the most Legion material that I've dealt with yet. Mm-hmm. And so my perspective shifted, and I really, became much more of a fan of the idea of Clark as Superboy, as a publicly known, publicly facing Superboy and a member of the Legion. But that was a shift for me because, I came up reading Superman comics in the 90s when that part of his lore had been divorced from the character. So it's like, I was reflecting on this before we got on the call to talk about this. Like, I guess the first time I probably really encountered the Legion was the post 0 Hour reboot during Final Night when they were there in Metropolis. And like, that was probably my first kind of meeting of them. And then within the next few years, we would have a standout episode of Superman the Animated Series, very similar to what we get here, where you get a trio of Legionnaires coming back and giving Clark glimpses into his future. Although at the end of that, he doesn't remember anything. But so that was kind of the conception that I had of this. It was very limited as far as the Legion's connection to Superman. And anything I knew beyond that was really kind of more in an academic sense. Like if I read a Wizard article that talked about what it was like pre-crisis or something like that.
Right.
So I think it was really, honestly, the work of Jeff Johns right in this period, this episode, and then in the comics right around this time where you had Secret Origin, which reintroduced the whole idea of Clark as Superboy and being a member of the Legion, and his whole Legion trilogy with Lightning Saga, Superman and the Legion, and Legion of Three Worlds. Like that really kind of cracked it open for me. And then more recently, that run of episodes I did and getting more into the material. Like now, I don't know if I want to set this in stone, but it's like, the idea of Clark as a known Superboy and a member of the Legion is kind of in my heart now in a way that it really wasn't before based on when I started. It's weird.
So the first thing, right, is every take I've had about comic books, I never set it in stone because I'll come to a different, because I actually had a period of time I was like, I don't think Superboy should be in the Legion because I like the Legion without them. And I've changed my take on that as well. As I actually like him not as I don't want to go back to the 70s where he's in every single story and he's the most important member, but I want him to be there. I think he's key. So nothing's set in stone. It's this is how I feel today. This is kind of where it goes. But it's funny when you mention like the Jeff Johns, that trilogy, right? Because for me, it was really a 6 of one and half a dozen of the other, in that I really loved parts of it. And then other parts of it, I was like, what are you doing? Like, this drives me nuts because I'm coming at it. I know all the comics that he's referencing, right? So I know what he's kind of going for, but I love the fact that he made the Legion critical to Superboy's, like to Clark Kent's development. And I thought that's the single best thing that he did for the whole Superman mythos of showing that he needed the Legion as much as the Legion needed him. And all I was thinking when I was watching this episode, honestly, was like, they should have done this 5 years earlier when he was just in Smallville and he wasn't in Metropolis and he was a much younger kid. Like, cause if you would have had like Clark in high school and the Legion shows up, like to me, that's the sweet spot of when this should happen, right? Because to me, it's just as he's developing, right? He just gets this taste of like, hey, you got these powers and here are these guys who've just told you, guess what? You're going to be awesome.
Yeah. It's like, I don't know that would have even crossed their minds at that time. Again, it took until season 4 before we started doing this. And they started with, again, basically Flash, Aquaman, Cyborg.
Mhm.
I feel like this might have been a little bit of a deep cut for them. I mean, and the reason we got this now, I shout out to my buddy Zach, who does the Always Hold On to Smallville podcast. And he's had Jeff Johns on the show, and Jeff talked about how this episode came to be. Obviously, he's a huge Legion fan. But he used to share a studio space with Jeff Loeb, who had been a producer on Smallville in seasons 2 through 4. And Johns had talked to Loeb about this idea for the Legion, and Loeb was like, "Oh, well, like I'll introduce you to the producers, and you could pitch it to them." And that's how this episode came to be. So it's like,
Right.
but for someone like Jeff Johns saying like, "Hey, we can bring the Legion into the story," it's like, yeah, I don't know that Smallville would have gotten there on its own, to be perfectly honest.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh, and like I said, because everything that you just mentioned, like by the 90s, they were completely pulled apart. I imagine for a lot of people, like if you were just reading the Triangle era, right? Or like, like if that was your Superman, you'd have no concept that these characters are important, right? And it really takes somebody who grew up on, well, I always get the sense that Jeff Johns grew up on the Paul Levitt stuff, and that's his callback to all of this. I could be wrong, but and then you see that connection, you see why that's important. But yeah, I mean, and that's why, for all the nitpicky things that I've said about this episode for the entire hour, it comes back to like, this is such a thrill as a Legion fan to see this happen, because to me, Superboy needs this.
Agree. I mean, I had a very similar journey as you, Anthony, because I'd really started my comic collecting and reading in the 90s, right? So, I came in at, right before Nightfall and the Triangle and Death of Superman era, and that's when, Zero Hour happened and all that stuff, and that's when I got into the Legion. So to me, it was like, the Legion needs no Superboy, right? It's fine the way it is. But then as I've evolved, and especially since in the last few years, as Jay and I have been kind of doing this and really getting into the characters, reading the entire Legion run, you really see the importance of Superboy as part of this bit of tapestry, right? As part of this whole backdrop of the future and the past, for that matter, because Clark being in the Legion teaches Clark how to interact as a part of a team with his powers, and that really goes then to reflect on, and at least in the comics, with his stint with the Justice League and other groups, right?
Yeah, it's it's so interesting because I always kind of came at it clearly, like from the perspective of, I have this history with Superman, and it's hard for me to kind of wrap my head around the idea of him being Superboy and needing to be part of the Legion. But I never really considered it from the other point of view. Like you're saying, depending on when you got into the Legion, the feeling may be exactly that. Like the Legion doesn't need Superboy. I'm thinking Superboy doesn't need the Legion. But then from the other end, it's like, does the Legion need Super? Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah. We talked about it recently, where the death of Superboy in the V3 Legion in the Baxter era. I remember collecting those because when I first started getting into the Legion, I'm just getting any of this past stuff as I can, and none of it really made any sense to me. And so I read this, and I'm like, oh, Superboy's dead. Okay, whatever. And then when you read this from the very beginning of the Legion, and you read all the way through the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, and you hit that issue, and it kind of hits you like a ton of bricks. You know what I mean? It's just, it's very effective at what it does because the character is so important to that group of people.
Yeah, like if you don't know, he considers Mon-El a brother, right? Like if you don't have that backstory and you don't have, and whereas like me, like I started reading the Legion in the 1970s when I was a kid, like you go over to your friend's house and they have a stack of comics and you start flipping through it and what grabs your attention. And I'm like, so science fiction, because I loved Star Wars. So aliens. So I'm like, I'm all over this. This is perfect. And, we talked about the Reflecto saga, which still holds a kind of fondness in my heart. It's something from my childhood. And you just see Jim roll his eyes of like, this is horrible. But the big moment of that is Superboy rejoining the Legion.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's the final. And you get that epic George Perez cover of Superman flying and the entire team behind him. And like, to me, that's like, yes, that's where he belongs. Like, that's where he's, that's part of it. I think it's the same thing. Like when you talk about, like we talk about Smallville, if you grew up on Smallville, you're like, this is my Superman. And if you grew up, so I remember like talking to people I will try to be as nice as I can about Man of Steel. I remember talking to people why I didn't like Man of Steel, and they're like, "What do you mean?" I go, "Well, that doesn't feel like Superman, or that's not the Superman that I know." And it's really hard to explain. You're like, "Well, as a kid, like I grew up on this, or this is what I wanted," right? To go back to this episode, that's the thing. Like, yeah, is this the exact Legion that I would want to see in my brain, in my canon? No, but we get a live action Legion. The powers are consistent. I thought they were all played well. Again, it's not the way I would do it, but it's done with respect. The characters are handled well. They're all shown as heroes. The teamwork is awesome. I'm happy to see this. And you know, so whenever anybody says like, well, why can't the Legion work as a TV show or whatever? And I go, worked here and it worked in the animated series and it worked like, I mean, I watched some of Supergirl and I don't remember being like, there were highs and lows and whatever, but I always liked the way they handled Mon-El in that. I don't know how they ended it because I gave up on that show. But anyways, it's like, I like seeing, like, obviously these characters work and they are important to these, you know, these more powerful characters or more popular characters. So let's just keep it going.
Yeah, for sure.
There you go. There's my Legion in the movies rant. So I said to my wife the other day, I'm like, the only way the Supergirl movie could be better than I'm hoping it's going to be is if at the very end 3 Legionnaires show up and say, we're going to take you to the future and teach you how to be a hero. And then my brain would explode in the movie theater. And I would just be like, I can die now. I don't need anything else. I'm all good.
Well, so I know we're going down a rabbit hole with this, but you know, the upcoming Supergirl movie is kind of a interesting concept because it can show how DC can do cosmic, which they haven't done in the movies yet, really. I mean, the Ryan Reynolds Green Lantern aside, which we won't talk about, but yeah, I mean, it's this is that kind of cosmic backdrop that you'd want for the Legion, and for a live action Legion, I think that would be kind of interesting. So
just imagine trying to cast 22 people and what the budget requirements for that would be.
Like, I don't know, has James Gunn ever said anything about the Legion? Like, I can't recall anything offhand.
The only thing that he stated was that, he stated that Matter Eater Lad was canon in his DCU because of the mention in Peacemaker where he ate the Wendy's. But to me, that means, you know, if Matter Eater Lad is canon, therefore that makes the Legion canon. So QED.
He
right?
sadly also said he doesn't like time travel stories. And that's the one. So I'm like, but I mean, like, look, he did Guardians of the Galaxy. If you can't do something like that with the Legion.
He also did Arms Fall Off Boy in the Suicide Squad as Splitter.
Yeah.
He's a little bit fast and loose with that kind of stuff anyway. So that's all good.
Exactly.
It's all good. So.
No, it's perfect. Okay. All right. So I think we've got through the whole episode. As much as I don't think we need to get to too much further into I mean, I know Cosmic Boy shows up again, but none of the others do.
Yeah, correct.
But that's kind of the end of the Legion for that. And we don't need to talk about what the remaining 11 episodes look like. So I think, how about we just do like a quick, like, final thoughts on the episode? Like, I mean, you both have said, Anthony, you said this is one of your favorites. I don't know what else to add to that, but if there's anything else,
I guess what is about the episode itself, from either the plot or the characterization or whatever, that makes it that way for you, that makes it a special episode?
Yeah, I mean, I would say generally, you know, when they brought in other heroes, for the most part, I think they were pretty successful, but I think this was. I think was sort of in the upper tier of that category, and for the reasons that we've been talking about, of kind of each one helping the other along. And seeing that moral determination on Clark's part and what he's able to impart to them, that really stood out to me. But I think two other pieces. One is that I know I mentioned Jeff Loeb, right, had been a producer and writer on the show for a few seasons, but like that was it. It wasn't as if Smallville was populated, the Smallville writers' room was populated by all these comic book writers. Mm-hmm. Like, it was a big deal at the time when Jeff Johns came in to write an episode. And it's like, yeah, I know then he went on to be very involved with like Flash and the Arrowverse generally and Stargirl and all that stuff. But this was an earlier time.
Right.
So it was very, very exciting that Jeff Johns, and keep in mind too, it's like, this is Jeff Johns like at the height of his DC powers, coming off of Infinite Crisis and everything. So that was really exciting. And then the other thing is, I think, like I was saying before, because of my kind of lack of experience with the Legion and that connection between Superman and the Legion not really being that much of a thing for me. I think that made this pop a little bit more because I think it just sort of helped sell me on the idea of it more. So I think for those reasons, this one stands out. And like I said, not to get into all the details of what happens in the rest of season 8, but this really did kind of feel like the high point. Like the first half was really strong. And then this was the episode right after a mid-season break. And we came back really strong. And then the rest of it, not my favorite. So I think for all of those reasons, this one remains a highlight generally, and especially in this season.
So Jay, what was, I guess, either standout, highlight, or low light for you?
Obviously, it's always a thrill when we get to see the Legion on another show, and then you realize millions of people are watching this, and they're now you're kind of like, let's hope that gets a Legion fan out of there. I'm going to focus on one thing that really stood out to me in a negative way, and it's the soap opera camera shots, like the super long shots on everybody, and it's like, and I couldn't unsee it. Like after I saw it the first time, and I was just like, real. And it's on Tom Welling. He doesn't say anything. He's just staring at the person, and then he says his line, and then it's still on him staring at the person. And I'm like, this episode could have been 10 minutes shorter if they had just cut all of these things out. But having said all that, like I enjoyed this far more than I thought it was going to be, because I was really kind of in a like, okay, this is, I don't have any memories of Smallville, so I wasn't really expecting it to really pop off the screen like it did. Again, happy I watched it, and I kind of want to go back and watch some more. Like it just seems like it's one of those series that I just completely missed on, and I kind of need to get into it. So
yeah, I found out that I actually had full access to this because I have a Hulu subscription, and even though I bought this particular episode, I didn't need to, but that's okay. But now I can go watch the rest of it because I do want to see how this Doomsday plot thread ends.
All right, keep your expectations low on that. Don't expect a big blowout fight, and then maybe you'll get more out of it.
Given the context, I'm okay with that.
I am not recommending anybody to do anything illegal, but Smallville is on both Netflix and Prime in Canada. So if you have a VPN, I didn't say anything, and I'm not suggesting anything like that.
I'll have to edit this out now. Oh my God.
Yeah. So
more work for me. Thanks, Jay. I appreciate that.
Yeah. No problem at all. It's
no, I'm only.
I was surprised. I didn't think it would be that easy to find it, and it was on both. And like everything, all 10 seasons. I was like, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I think that availability has really contributed to its resurgence and continued popularity. Like the fact that it's available as streaming, like people continue to come to it.
Yep.
Well, actually, the more that I think about it, the reason why it's on both Prime and Netflix is so you guys wouldn't know this. So in Canada, we have these Canadian content laws. So you have to have, I think it's 40% of the content you produce, or maybe it's 25, has to be either made in Canada or starring Canadians or has some Canadian connection so that we're supporting our industries. And Smallville hits that on a number of different cases. So probably everyone's like, this is an easy show to put on to cover our content restrictions. So
right on. The last thing I'll say is that I definitely encourage more Smallville watching. That would never turn anyone away from that. One thing I would say, though, this is representative of what Smallville does in terms of its introduction of other heroes. But at the same time, like I've been saying, seasons 8, 9, and 10 really do represent a very distinct iteration of the show. I do encourage, you to go back, start at the beginning. You'll find that those early seasons, it's a very different vibe. Definitely, I would say more character driven. The show and the town is more well populated. You have the family members. It's a different vibe. And I think those early seasons really represent the essence of what Smallville is. It became something else in the end, and it allowed it to continue for those few more seasons. I think it needed to do something different at that point. So there's value in those final 3. But at the same time, I wouldn't necessarily hold up this episode and say, like, this is truly representative of the entire series of the show.
Do you think that's because of the presence of Ma and Pa Kent?
Yeah, I think that has a lot to do with it. Until this point, the majority of the action was set in the town of Smallville and all that. So, yeah, we just had a bunch of changes at this point. And, still made for interesting seasons. But,
sure.
But yeah, definitely that family aspect was a core. And like I said at the top, the fact that we lost Lex here. The Lex Clark dynamic and Lex's whole journey. It was a cornerstone of the show. So there were a number of really kind of quintessential aspects that are gone by this point that you'll have if you go back at the beginning.
Nice.
So is he your Lex Luthor? Is that who you imagine?
1,000%, yeah.
Okay. Oh, wow. Okay.
I enjoy virtually all of them, to be honest. But yeah, no, in my heart of hearts, like that's Lex.
I've heard that a ton, and that's another reason why I want to check out the show. Is I'm just knowing that I missed all that, and you get one of the quintessential Lex performances. It's I've only heard good things, so yeah. Unfortunately, there's only so many hours in the day, and you're and you go,
Listen,
like,
the way I'm able to justify a lot of this is by doing episodes on it. Otherwise, it's hard.
There you go. Yeah. Well, it's the same. Like, I completely missed the Legion animated series, and if it wasn't for this podcast, I don't think I ever would have watched them. And I'm really happy that I did. But
So good.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. So, see, podcasts are good. They're
good for everybody. Good. Yeah, I just wanted to make a couple shout outs here with regards to the other things in the episode here. Like I said, the earlier, the Legion code of whatever the existing Legion is now is kind of weird because there's the whole killing stuff that we were talking about. But I also noted that when they first talk to Clark, they're like, "Oh, we can't tell you anything from the future," and then of course they start spilling a lot of like, "Oh, you're going to be really cool in the future. We're all depending on you." It's I think it's more of a framework than a code. I think at this point, so good on Clark for setting them straight.
It's like the Prime Directive is a suggestion sometimes.
Exactly. Yeah. And then the other thing too is that I counted, I'm not sure if this is either 4 or 5, I called them Legionisms. So I counted 2 Sprocks and 1 Greif. And then there were there's one other weird comment where Rock was telling Garth not to act like a sub, which was, if you're a Legion fan, you know exactly what that context is. If you're not, you might take the wrong idea. So, and that's all I'm going to say about that.
I didn't even think of that. Yeah. Hey, it's all right.
Yeah.
Right. So, all right.
I think we've done as much on this episode without.
I think we've done all that damage,
killing our listeners. Is there anything, Jim? Anything? Any emails? Any comments that we want to talk about?
Yeah, we did. We have received a few emails from some of our friends here. Most of this is around our last couple of podcasts around Reap Daggle, aka Chameleon Boy. So our friend Tim says this is around the situation where Cam and his crew were stranded on the asteroid. And he says it's easy to see why Ayla loved Bryn so strongly. They fell in love during a time when a new boy would appear in a story, and a girl Legionnaire made it clear through thought balloons and conversation and sometimes reckless trust that she loved the new boy, and they stayed together forever and ever, or until the Levitts run. And he's always pronounced the Colossal Boy's name Gim, not Jim, and always will. So anyway, okay. So that's Tim. So thanks, Tim. And then our friend of both of our podcasts, our friend Martin Gray, emails, and he says, "Thanks for the 2-part Cam focus. Our boy deserves it, and it was great to have Derek join you. So far as a cold and lonely corner of hell goes, no way did Imra and Bryn get up to any hanky-panky. Imra is far too prim, and she'd only recently been shocked by how much more intense Ayla's feelings for Bryn were than hers for Garth. So she's not going to get in their way. Also, we see the beginning and end of their moment. Nothing happened. I don't think we got any thought balloons from quote-unquote Vi during the time Salu was kidnapped, did we? Clever, that. Gim with a hard G? I say, Derek, nay. All the early Legionnaires had 50s names with the odd tweak that, for example, Imra/Irma, Rock, Joe, Tina, Salu, Sally, and it makes more sense when you're looking at the text here. And he could even make a claim for Tenzel/Denzel. So Gim has to be Jim. Given how far ahead you are with these episodes, it's likely been laid out. So yes, we talked about that in our last episode where it could be either. And then our new email from our friend Mike Brink. This is the last one here. It says, "Thank you for the work you're putting into the podcast. Your love for the team and its various incarnation shows and makes every single episode a delight to listen to." Thank you, Mike. "I really appreciate your mix of topics ranging from character spotlights to storylines to villains to eras and more. I rarely know what to expect next, and I find myself really enjoying that uncertainty. I enjoy both of your perspectives and the good-natured tenor of your discussions. You share your own opinions, but consistently make room for fans who may feel differently. In the You're Not Alone department, I have also questioned the correct pronunciation of Gim/Jim. While Timberwolf is currently my favorite, Colossal Boy would certainly make my top 10, so I'm looking forward to his spotlight episode. Polar Boy would also make my top 10, and I always felt like he should have been made a Legionnaire far sooner than he did. Keep up the great work, Mike." Thank you, Mike, for the kind words. And yes, I absolutely agree with you about Polar Boy. I think they kind of nerfed him and kept him out of the Legion for far too long. So,
especially when you read this when you read the Silver Age and Sunboy can literally just shine brightly, like he doesn't have the fire powers yet, and you're like, how did he get in and Polar Boy didn't? I have to ask, Anthony, Jim or Gim?
I don't know that I have. Listen, I'm still trying to come to terms with Kara versus Kara. This has been an ongoing thing on my podcast, and especially now we're barreling towards the movie. I'm in the midst of Supergirl coverage because it's like, in my head, it was always Kara. The DCAU said Kara. Smallville said Kara. Obviously, the movie went with Kara, and then the Melissa Benoist series comes along, and then it's just Kara, 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 and I'm like, it's very hard. I go back and forth. So that's the battle I'm currently waging.
So is it Kal-El or Kal-El?
I always say Kal-El.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah,
Well, and in the spirit of this particular episode, right? Apparently, Garth comes from the planet Wynath versus Wynath, right? That's another one of the big debates of pronunciation in the Legion lore. And Wynath is the correct pronunciation because I am hooked on phonics, and that's how it works. So, and that's all I'm going to say. All right, let me see. I think that's about it. That's all of our emails, unless you have any other comments from the emails that we had there, Jay.
No, always glad to get emails and always glad to get feedback like that. And I mean, I think the biggest takeaway of all this is we are always going to disagree about something, and you can either be nice about it. I mean, the pronunciation we joke about, but it's all what's in our head, right? It's what we grew up. And it's like you just said, Anthony, like you grew up and it's Kara, 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 and then suddenly a TV show changes it and you're like, no, this is wrong. What are you doing? Like because in your mind, it's, it's something else. It's the same, like RJ Brand for a lot of people has like a Southern accent. And in my brain, it's like, that sounds so weird and strange, but it's because the animated show, he had that one episode and he comes out and I was like, this is just wrong. This does not sound how this character sounds to me. And none of them are right. None of them are wrong. Yeah. It's just how you hear the character, how you hear the voices. I mean, I still have problems saying Kund, but I'll get used to that because I don't want us to get canceled.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll tell you what. I always thought the RJ was a more of a Scottish accent, right? Just some of his mannerisms, just how that was portrayed over the years. But yeah, we talk about Jeff Johns and the Legion of Three Worlds, and he had a kind of a cute moment in that story where he kind of addressed the different pronunciations of the different words from different universes and things like that. So that's a nice way of addressing that particular situation because it kind of says, yeah, you're all right. Everybody's right, however they want to do it. Yeah, it's comics, right? Anthony, you are our guest. Thank you again for joining. Why don't you go ahead and tell us where folks can find you?
Yeah, no, thank you guys for having me. This was a lot of fun. And yeah, so I host Digging for Kryptonite. And like you were mentioning, I have a new show, Lighting the Bat Signal. And both are available on all major podcast platforms. And if you look up Digging for Kryptonite on any social media channel, we're there. So yeah, I hope people will follow and check out the shows. And this was a blast. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. You're welcome here anytime you like.
Thank you.
And Jay, where can folks find you?
All right. So I do a weekly Legion review column that you can find at jmlonglivethelegion.blogspot.com. And we are just in the middle of Retro Boot, the first Polybits run on that. So lots of Durlin Dragons, which is where we're at right now. If you want to find me on social media, you can find me either on Discord or on Reddit with the username Drake Burrows. You can find me on Blue Sky at jmckernan.bsky.social. And yeah, if you haven't joined the Legion Discord server, please reach out to us and we will get you on there. It is a great place to talk all things Legion. Jim, where can everybody find you?
So I have my Legion Reviews website at jimboslegion.blogspot.com where I try to post one new comic a week and have been epically failing on that. But you can find me personally on Blue Sky at jimbofett.bsky.social, on Reddit at jimbofett87, and on Discord as jimbofett on the Legion Fan Club Discord as well as the CPOV Discord. If you want to follow this podcast or get access to the Legion Discord, we are at longlivethelegion.bsky.social on Blue Sky, or send us an email and tell us what you think at longlivethelegion2025@gmail.com. And we also have other social media presences that are being established now, right, Jay? So we have our YouTube channel as well as Instagram.
You can check some fine videos on both of those platforms. And we do little shorts as well, just little clips of these episodes. Yeah, just more Legion content because you can never have too much.
That's exactly right. Give us a 5-star rating on your podcatcher of choice or wherever you can do ratings. Give us 2 5-star ratings. We love it. And so we're going to go ahead and close the mission monitor board now for today and shut things down. And until we see you all next time, long live the Legion.
Long live the Legion.
Long live the Legion. Video games are a unique medium.
They can tell stories,
Immerse us in strange, fantastic worlds.
blur the very boundaries of our reality.
But at the end of the day, video games are fun. Whatever fun is to you.
I'm Jeff Moonen.
And I am Matt, a.k.a. Stormageddon.
And on Fun and Games, we talk about the history, trends, and community of video games.
It's a celebration of all the games we play and all the fun we find within them.
And there's so many more games out there. So we hope you'll share in that conversation with us.
Fun and Games podcast with Matt and Jeff. Find us on certainpov.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
And happy gaming.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.